This meeting is being recorded.
Tonight we'll go back in time to seasons past, when 22 men graced the rugged fields of yesterday, fighting for one more first down, one more yard gain, one final score, which would bring victory after 60 minutes of battle on the gridiron. Tonight we'll explore the world of Gridiron Greats. Welcome to Gridiron Greats, football history and its memorabilia on the Sports History Network. In conjunction with Swick Enterprises, we're live from the Southport, North Carolina home of Gridiron Greats magazine. I'm Bob Swick, publisher and editor of Gridiron Greats magazine, and I'll be your host for the show. Gridiron Greats is the only publication in America that focuses upon the history and memorabilia of the North American football game since its inception since 1869. We cover 150 plus years of football history and memorabilia, and you can find us on the web at gridirongreatsmagazine.com. It's at this time I'd like to introduce my guest co-host. He's a senior contributing writer to Gridiron Greats magazine, a football memorabilia historian, specializing in early Pittsburgh Steelers items and Football Hall of Fame game programs and tickets. He's the former owner and partner of both MSB Sports Cards and BSD Auctions. He's well known to our magazine and to our podcast, a good friend of mine and a neighbor. I'd like to welcome to the show this evening, Mr. John Spano. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bob, for having me. It's been a while, and I appreciate you asking me to co-host today. It's quite an honor.
You got big shoes to fill, but I know you can do it.
And I understand that. So I'm gonna keep that in mind throughout the podcast.
And I apologize for bothering you during vacation time, because I know you enjoy, like I do, the Carolina summers here, and they're nice. What's the good word? The heat and the sun that we get. But anyways, good to have you on. Thanks for filling in at the last minute. Just a little background. John and I recently, I set up at a show in Columbia, South Carolina a few weekends ago, and John came down that Saturday and set up with me. And we had a good time getting caught up and talking about things. John, give me some ideas of what your thoughts were from that show. I mean, we talked about this pretty much at length quite a bit, and give me some background and some ideas of what you thought about.
Well, it was interesting, Bob, because that's the first time that I'd set up at a show. Actually, it's the first time that I've been to a show since the National in 2018.
Wow.
So 6 years in between shows where I was a regular attendee and somebody was setting up at 3-4 shows a year, probably for about 10, 12 years in a row. Nothing happened that made me quit cold turkey. It just circumstances in my life, and time just kind of got away from me. And you and I have been talking about setting up together down here for a long time, and that was a nice show. I was impressed with its layout. I was impressed with the material that I saw on the floor. Obviously, a lot of things have changed in the last 6 years, and especially if you look back as far as 20 or 30 years.
Right.
But overall, I was impressed with the amount of material there. It's things that when you go to a show, you expect to find things that you can't find on the internet, and there was plenty of that there. And I'll admit, there's some things that I'm going to say I don't understand, and it's not a bad thing. It's getting people to come out to the shows, and I'm sure there's people that do crossover, but there's a lot of people that are into those collectible game cards, and that was I would have to say probably at least 2/3 of the show was people that were dealing in those. And again, nothing to each their own. You collect what you want to collect and what makes you happy. And if that's what keeps the shows going, and there's still a lot of vintage football and baseball material on the floor as well, then hopefully into the future, that's what we're going to continue to see. You and I had talked about this when people were saying that the internet was going to kill the show, kill the stores. I think it's done that to the stores to some extent, but I think the shows are alive and well. I think people still want to have that card in their hand before they purchase it, before they fork over the cash for it. Have the ability to see it in person rather than just trust something that they see on eBay or online or even in an auction catalog. it's nice to get out and see that. And, that on Saturday, I was only there for the one day. It was a 3-day show, correct? Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I
Yeah.
was there on Saturday, and that at some points it felt like good old times. You couldn't move through the crowd to get from table to table. That's a good thing. It's a good thing for the hobby.
Right. Again, I call myself a dinosaur in the hobby. I always have, and I always will, for a lot of different reasons. But at the same time, I got to say this: I am just fascinated by the whole Pokemon thing. That this cartoon card has such a grip on young people and on young collectors at the same time, and I understand it to a large degree. They're not going to want to pick up an 1894 Mayo and say, "Gee, Dad, can I have $2,000 and buy this card?" type of thing. They're going to want what they know about, so on and so forth. So I think realistically, it's an interesting blend of customers that we see go through the show. And I've said this before, doing shows down here in the Carolinas. I spent a lot of time educating customers that come to the table because they've never seen a lot of the stuff that I have, on the table. And they really don't know what it is, and they don't know why they would want to buy it, so on and so forth. And I saw that in Columbia at the same time, too, even though there were several very, very strong vintage dealers, including my good friend and friend of the magazine, John Day, who's from that area. And he kind of echoed a lot of what I said, too. And John's got a couple of years on me, so it's interesting. It's to see the evolution of the card show over the past 40 years. And I was trying to think that day. I think the first show I did was back in '82. So it's over 40 years of doing shows. A lot's changed. And, some of it for the good and some of it not so good. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. And it's the evolution in it, and kind of, you hate to just write it off as it is what it is. But when you're, and I was just talking to Jared Krause shortly before I called into the show. He was jogging just yesterday, or it might have been this morning, and he said that there were people that had an impromptu swap meet held on the side of the road by one of the local universities there, where it was people that were in their 20s trading Pokemon cards. So I guess there's worse things that people can be doing, and it's, as Jared has expressed it a number of times, it's what they have grown up with, and so they're now, just like we have, they're reliving, instead of going out to the corner store and buying a 25-cent or a 20-cent or a 5-cent pack of cards.
Right.
They bought these things and never realized that someday the things that they were using to play games with were going to have such value. So now they're trading them. So
it's amazing. It's amazing. And it's also amazing to me, like I said, a couple of years ago, I bought, just to kill some time when we were waiting for the house to be ready, I bought card packs in Walmart and in Big Lots. And I can't believe, I'm spending $10 for a pack of cards for something I used to spend a nickel for, or, tops 50 cents or 99 cents a pack is now $10 a pack. It just amazes me, truly amazes me, to say the least. Now, for those viewers and listeners tuning in for the first time, John writes from behind the table, a great column for Gridiron Greats magazine. And I know, John, you're going to be discussing in the fall issue your experience. I'm looking forward to that article, to say the least, because it's going to be very interesting what you wrote about, to say the least.
I've been digesting. It's been almost a month now, but I had my daughter with me, and was just kind of explaining some things to her. The big thing for her and for me as well, I think the biggest surprise for me, because 6 years out of the hobby, there were a few dealers that used to carry around the metallic briefcases.
Right.
Some of them to the extent where they had a locking mechanism around for their wrist or
right.
whatever. And that was years ago. But now they have a kiosk. They had a table set up at the front for companies that sell these cases, and they don't look quite like the old metallic ones, but they look more like a big lunchbox, a big square lunchbox, and inside of there's a foam or some type of felt slots for their graded cards, and for most of those are for the Pokemon cards. So they carry these around the show, and it looks like, if you didn't know where you were, you might think it was a bunch of guys that were carrying their lunch pails to work.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. And I look back at the good old days where you just kept a cheese box with you and you put your cards in the cheese box as you were walking around, or an 800 count box. And then you got to your car or wherever, and then you put them away. And that was it. It's unbelievable. It's really unbelievable. Well, I'll look forward to that article coming up, that column coming up. Okay, our special guest is here, and I'd like to get started. We got a lot to go over with him. Our special guest tonight teaches history at Christian Brothers High School in Memphis, Tennessee, and he received his PhD from the University of Memphis, Tennessee. He's a native of Schenectady, New York, where he grew up in a racially and ethnically diverse neighborhood. His current project, Showboatin' in Memphis, chronicles the journey of Memphis to gain an NFL club, which instead landed a franchise in the old upstart USFL, United States Football League, becoming one of the league's strongest franchises. His last project, the Memphis Red Sox, a Negro League's history, shares the story of the city's Negro League's baseball team, the Memphis Red Sox. It examines Memphis' symbolic meaning and value as a Negro League baseball city during the Jim Crow era. His first work, Memphis Hoops, Race and Basketball in the Bluff City, 1968 to 1997, examines the city through the lens of Memphis State University basketball team and its star player turned coach, Larry Finch. He's published articles in the West Tennessee Historical Society papers, Blackball Journal, Cooperstown Symposium on Baseball and American Culture, and the Society for American Baseball Research Biography Project. I'd like to welcome to the show Mr. Keith Wood. Keith, welcome to the show.
Bob, I appreciate you having me on today. How you doing over there in North Carolina?
We're good. We're good. We're hanging in there. I've never sweated more in my life than I have been down here, but it's a lot of heat and humidity. It's great. We're near the beach.
See, we get the same heat and humidity out here in Memphis.
Yeah.
And no beach. So we need to trade places sometime, Bob. Be glad to do it.
You're more than welcome to come anytime. We got a guest room, and more than happy to have you and talk football. Now, before I get started, I went through my memorabilia to try to see what I had with some USFL stuff. And what I'm going to show is a 1984 USFL Memphis Showboat packet schedule that was issued by Coca-Cola back in 1984. And the pocket schedule had a little blurb about tickets and the season schedule. But I also found, and I knew I had some of these, was from the World Football League in the 1970s.
John Bassett's Memphis.
Unused tickets, which, believe it or not, are very, very common in the market because a lot of them went unsold. And when they went to auction to try to fulfill debt, they came up and have been sold over and over again. So let me get started, Keith. Welcome you to the show. And how'd you get started about writing about football?
Well, to be honest, Bob, so you talked earlier about my first two books. I coached high school basketball for 20 years here in Memphis, and that opened the door for my dissertation, which became my first book on Larry Finch. When I was done with that, I jumped into another project on the Memphis Red Sox, which is our Negro League team. And that book just came out in June. And I was walking around Christian Brothers, and one of my colleagues asked, he said, Keith, what are you doing next? I was like, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. And he said, football sells in this country now. It's the game. It's America's pastime, right, Bob? And so having bypassed baseball as America's favorite sport, football was obvious. So the choice was either to look at John Bassett's Memphis Grizzlies or to look at the USFL Showboats. And I chose to jump in with the Showboats because a lot of those guys are still with us, right? Steve Verhart, who is the general manager in year 2, is still the president of the Liberty Bowl. A lot of contacts living here in Memphis of players and folks that were on staff. And so what I did is I jumped in. I've read about 25, 30 books on the NFL, Crapeau, McCambridge, right? Got into as much as I could get and get a a better understanding of the NFL and then other leagues that were trying to challenge the NFL. And, Memphis has got a great story. Here's a city that for years is trying to become major league and just keeps getting left at the altar. And so the USFL story is what most here would consider the closest thing we got to the NFL. We had Bud Adams, Oilers stop momentarily in Memphis. But if you remember correctly, those games, Memphis didn't come out to support that. We knew we were a stopping point. And in fact, when the Oilers played the Steelers, there was more black and gold in the stadium than there was baby blue and red. And Bud Adams was livid.
Right.
Memphis really said, if you don't want us, just go to Nashville. We're good. So the USFL, and there was NFL talent on the field. I mean, let's start with the Minister of Defense, right?
Yep.
Reggie White. I see all the Packers stuff. I mean, you're talking about one of the greatest defensive ends of all time. And when you watch film of him in 84 and 85, he may be young, but from everybody I've talked to and the tape I've watched, there wasn't a running back faster or a defensive end better on that field on any given day when the Showboats took the field.
Yeah. The USFL, to me, I watched it religiously for three seasons. I loved it. It was just something exciting for spring. Turning on the TV on a Sunday, I could watch football again during summertime, springtime, so on and so forth. But the game was explosive, and it really upended the NFL, in my opinion, to a large degree, because the NFL, everybody calls it the no fun league, blah, blah, blah. Stoic players, stoic teams, stoic ownership. You do it by the book. Everything is recorded out, so on and so forth. You don't leave 1 minute unscripted. The USFL was just a breath of fresh air. It was wide open. It also reminded me of the World Football League, because I did watch some of the World Football League when I could. I listened to it more on the radio than anything else. But it was, alternative leagues to me have always represented what, in my opinion, football should be. An explosive game, a chess match out there between coaches, players who want to play, and pardon the pun, players who don't want to showboat. They just go in, they grind it out, they get off the field, they shake hands type of thing, so on and so forth. And I think that's what the USFL represented. So anyways, when we communicated earlier and you said you were doing a book on it, I think it's great, because the history of the USFL needs to be preserved as much as it can, as much as the World Football League is preserved. And that's why I mentioned a mutual friend of ours, Richie Franklin, and all he's done preserving the history of those two leagues, along with several other gentlemen that he works with, so on and so forth. So anyway, you got a good vibe and a good storyline there that really needs to be talked about, because again, I would love to see histories of each USFL team and WFL team, and to preserve the history of it.
Have you read Paul Reed's book on the USFL?
Yeah, I actually have it here in the back, so it's a good.
I talked to Paul about a month ago, and he is super excited because there's one history out there on the New Jersey Generals, which really it's not bad, but it's really just newspaper articles.
Exactly.
Put together by Curtis Walker, and no disrespect, but what I'm trying to do is really tell Memphis's story, right? So as an academic, as a historian, I don't want to just give you the dates, scores, how many yards. I'm trying to take a look at what the game really meant, what the Showboats meant to the city of Memphis at that point in time, right? And so I think there's a story there that needs to be told. And I think I'm watching the May 85 game at the Liberty Bowl between the Showboats and the Houston Gamblers.
Okay.
You got Jim Kelly on one side, Reggie White on the other side. You got Jack Pardee coaching the run and shoot, Mouse Davis's run and shoot, even though he's moved on to Denver and the Gold. You've got Pepper Rogers. You want to talk about one of the most eccentric guys that's ever coached professional football. I mean, there's a dude, and man, he fits Memphis. right? He's all about what it means to live in the 901, what it means to live. And, the NBA's Grizzlies have this grit and grind mentality. And,
Yeah.
man, I think the showboats resemble that in the 80s.
Yeah.
One of the ads, you mentioned the No Fun League.
Yeah.
The ABC coverage actually had a USFL ad that stayed in the YouTube video that mocked the No Fun League.
Yeah.
It's USFL where players have fun.
Yeah.
The fun bunch in the end zone, the high-fiving, the 2-point conversions, all those things that the USFL brought to football fans, man, that was it. And I really think Commissioner Rozelle does a pretty darn good job of trying to minimize
Right.
while it's in. And then once it disappears, it's like it never existed.
Exactly.
So by putting the showboats and the USFL back on the map, we can recall some pretty good football and some great times in the 1980s.
Oh, definitely. And, it's interesting also, you try to parallel today's USFL, which is just basically a minor league of football, which is more like a farm team for the NFL, for guys to fill in once in a while. I don't see a lot. I see talent. I don't see a lot of talent in the current USFL. I see guys who are hungry to play again. I see more, in my opinion, and I'm going to go off on a limb. I see more talent in indoor football than I did with the USFL over the years.
So last Friday, I was talking to Steve Earhart, who's the president of the Memphis Liberty Bowl. And if you remember correctly, he was the number 2 guy in the USFL behind Chet Simmons, who started ESPN. So Steve and I are talking, great dude. And this is how much Memphis means to him. He said, my favorite experience of my sports career, sports agent, number 2 guy in the USFL, general manager of the Colorado Rockies, was my time with the Memphis Showboats. What does that say about the USFL and about the city of Memphis?
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's important. And, the talent wise, we were talking about the players. And he said 5 years after the Showboats' last game, you take a look at the 1990 rosters, 17 guys from the Showboats were still playing in the NFL.
Yeah.
He said, Keith, go find an NFL team from 85 and tell me if there's 17 guys still playing on their roster in 90.
Right.
So the Showboats roster from 0 to 30 would match up with any NFL roster.
Right.
Now, 31 to 50, different story.
Yeah.
But 0 to 30, Steve Earhart believes wholeheartedly, and I'd agree,
Yeah.
that he had the talent here in Memphis.
Yeah. Great amount of talent, to say the least. It was very, again, like I said, it was a great league. And, sadly, it was fun while it lasted, but it's still historical in the perspective of football. And sadly, the NFL, to me, and, John and I talked about it, my regular co-host Joe and I talked about it numerous times. They really believe that the NFL history begins at 1970 after the AFL merged with them. And they're very, very limited as far as what they want to talk about from 1920 to 1969. And that's wrong, because everything builds upon one another. And the World Football League built on the NFL, and the USFL has built on the NFL, and arena football has built on with the NFL, and the current USFL has built on with the NFL. So it's an amazing story, to say the least.
Yeah, I think, you can, as you're looking at some of the players, Mossy Cade is a quality NFL player. Bess Lou had played with the Miami Dolphins. Steve Hammond at linebacker. Walter Lewis was the first starting black quarterback at Alabama.
Yeah.
Paul Bear Bryant. And the ownership. Everybody remembers Donald Trump and the New Jersey Generals. And then we had Willie Donovan, who's Memphis born and bred. He's a guy that revolutionized the cotton trade around the world. He's the first guy selling cotton in China in the 70s. This guy, and he's willing to put $20-30 million when Trump opened his checkbook. And no one talks about this. Billy Donovan went dime for dime with Donald Trump down here in Memphis. And he wasn't, Donovan never asked for the front pages.
Yeah.
He wasn't trying to be like Trump to get on the back page of the New York Post.
Yeah.
He just wanted what was best for the Memphis Showboats and really the city of Memphis, because about 7-8 years later, when the NFL brought in Jacksonville and Charlotte, if you remember correctly, Memphis was in the Final Four or Final Five for one of those expansion franchises. And so, Donovan doesn't, he's not just here for the USFL. He's in it for the city to gain an NFL franchise.
Right. And I still never understand why Jacksonville was picked over Memphis. It's to this day, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
I can help you out on that. Steve Earhart was very straightforward, and it's very simple. Jacksonville put on a new stadium. In 1992, the city of Memphis, we just elected our first African-American mayor, and he was a rookie. He was, feeling the waters out. He had a consensus racially, and he sort of went back and forth on whether he was going to support a new stadium.
Yeah.
And Roger Goodell told Fred Smith, who you may know, the FedEx company. Fred Smith, that ownership group with Billy Donovan, and Roger Goodell told Fred Smith, point blank, you build us a stadium, Memphis gets the team because we need somebody in the central time zone.
Right.
Jacksonville tore down the old Gator Bowl.
Yeah, and rebuilt
A new one, and the rest is history. Memphis once again got left at the altar. So, there's just, it's one of those things, and Memphis is a very fiscally conservative city, and for a city to put the money down on a stadium requires a lot of tax dollars, and that wasn't very popular in Memphis. I think Steve Earhart said this: Mayor Harrington becomes one of the strongest mayors in the country by 2000. If 10 years later we're in the same position, Harrington would have been able to pull the strings and make it happen. But unfortunately, in 92, he doesn't have that political wherewithal, and Memphis misses out.
Wow. Unbelievable. John.
Yes.
I think you got.
Yeah, Keith. Your new book's called Showboating in Memphis.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that our listeners and our viewers are able to find that right away. I mean, I have some questions for you, but you've answered a lot of them. But is there a single story, a single hook that you'd like to throw out there for a couple of minutes, a story you'd like to share with everybody?
It's hard to pick out one. I think if you remember, one of the great stories, Reggie White, remember, is coming in from the University of Tennessee, and the USFL had this very unique territorial draft where each franchise was able to protect 5 colleges. Memphis had Tennessee State, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Memphis State, and Mississippi State. Those were our 5 schools. And so we drafted Reggie White, and he comes and signs the largest contract that the Showboats offer, deservedly so. And when he gets to Memphis, he's a young kid, right? For the most part, his mother is a single mother in Chattanooga before he goes to UT. His dad, she remarries, and dad's in the military, stepdad's in the military. So when he gets out of college, he never really had a lot of money. This is his first real paycheck. And so he goes to a local clothing store, and they close the store down. They give him the NFL or the professional football treatment, right? And he's buying all sorts of things. Well, he ends up buying like 150 or 200 pairs of socks. Like, who needs 150 pairs of socks? And so when he gets to practice the next day, the guys are wearing him out. They're like, you did what? You paid how much for 150 pairs of socks? Like, Reggie didn't understand the simple concept of the team provides jocks, socks, and everything you need at practice. So this guy told him, I'm buying all this stuff. Now, at first, Reggie's like really upset. But the one thing you got to know about Reggie White, and Bob, you as a Packer fan, you probably know this, he loved to clown. He did the best Rodney Dangerfield impression that you ever heard. In fact, people said it might have been even better than Rodney himself.
Yeah.
And so Pepper Rogers pulled him aside and said, Reg, all right, dude, let's take this. And what we're going to do with the next home game is we're going to pass out athletic socks to the first 20,000 fans that walk through the Liberty Bowl Stadium. And we're going to give all socks to all the players. So when they walked out the tunnel, here comes Reggie White waving the sock. Now, you got to remember,
Wow.
before, what's the defensive line called for the New York Jets?
Stock exchange.
There you go.
Stock
Now,
exchange,
so in
yeah.
Memphis, we now have the the Memphis Stock Exchange. And
Wow.
man, Reggie played that up. So for the whole 2 years, that was it. I mean, you want to talk about a guy that, I mean, there's some implications there that the brother got taken advantage of as a young kid with a contract by somebody that knew he had a lot of money. But Reggie and Pepper Rogers spin it, endear it, embrace it, and man, you know, just it becomes a piece of the Showboats lore.
No, that's a great story. That's an awesome story, actually.
That is amazing. I never would imagine that was the reason why they had the socks that time. I do vaguely remember it, but I had no idea that was the parallel to it. And I can't believe the store he's in, they're allowing him to buy that many socks, type of thing. I mean, that's
I think, Bob, I grew up in upstate New York, and I've lived in Memphis for 30 years. And I think one of the questions that I always get asked by my friends from back home, why did Martin Luther King get shot in Memphis, right? So there's a unique racial dynamic in this city.
Yeah.
The book on Larry Finch, I mean, when Memphis State goes to the NCAA championship game against Bill Walton's UCLA in '73, it's only 5 years after the United States Army is in Memphis in martial law after King gets shot.
Yep.
Right? The Southmen are at that same time, right? 73, 74.
Right.
And you're talking about a very delicate racial balance.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that sport does is it brings us together. And what the Showboats did, much like Larry Finch and basketball in '73, if you look at any game tape of the Liberty Bowl Stadium, it's not just white folks. The games were accessible for the black community.
Yeah.
You could buy a ticket, right? And you saw white and black Memphis come together for 3 hours on a spring afternoon to support our Showboats. And man, there's something to that. And that's just an incredible story.
Yeah, that is a great storyline too, and then I think that's overlooked to a large degree. I mean, I tell people, I don't look at the race card anymore whatsoever. But again, it's hard not to remember what happened even in the '80s, even though it wasn't that long ago. I mean, it was still, problems still existed at that time, especially in the South. And what I find interesting being down here now, we've only lived here for almost 3 years. The amount of college football locally is great. I enjoy, knowing I got on any given Saturday, there's probably 10 different local games I can actually watch, between TV or if I want to take a ride and see something. And then on Sundays, I haven't seen a lot of NFL teams the way I see down here, meaning that I see Titans games, I see Panthers games. I mean, last season I watched every Panthers game, which was, very, very difficult to watch. And I would critique them after each game, so on and so forth. But anyways, it's a whole different vibe for football compared to where I came from up. And, I grew up in Connecticut. So, we had the in my opinion, it was Patriots, Jets, Giants. That's all we watched for years, type of thing. And local colleges, a few state schools, and the Ivy League, and that was it. But down here, it's wide open. So I could see something like that in Memphis really taking off, especially for a USFL. And again, I watch mostly New Jersey General games up northeast because they were on, but then I watched whatever the late game was. So I did get, a view of the entire game. So getting back to another question that we had talked about before, what do you think was the biggest or is the biggest difference between the USFL and the NFL? What you gave a lot of information, but is there one exact thing? And we can't look at spring versus fall football. That's not question here. But what would be a real strong point of difference between the two leagues?
I was talking to Harry Sidney. So if you're a Packer fan, you may remember Harry Sidney.
Yeah.
He spent 2 years with the Denver Gold. His last season in the USFL was here in Memphis with the Showboats. We just talked yesterday on the phone. And Harry and I, as we talked, he said, Keith, let's look at it this way. My first year in Denver, we had 7 guys, maybe 6, on a side of the ball that could play in the NFL. He said now in 84, our second year, that number's up to 8. 7, 8 guys. He said now in 85, when I'm in Memphis, 11 guys can go toe to toe and play any given Sunday with the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And the growth of the league over those 3 years. And I think that's the difference, right? And any league, even the AFL, when you're starting out in the mid 60s, right? You've got the Chiefs were originally the Texans.
Yeah.
You've got other teams. Originally, they're not on the caliber either. Now, remember, nobody expected Broadway Joe to win the Super Bowl. Why? It's the Colts. There's no way that's going to happen. And this is after 10 years. The USFL does it in 3. And Roselle does everything he can not to mimic the mistakes of competing against the AFL, because plausibly, the Houston Gamblers, New Jersey Generals, I'd argue the Stars, Philadelphia and Baltimore, they're one of the top-notch programs. The Birmingham Stallions don't financially tank in the middle of 85.
Yeah.
They're in there as well. The Michigan Panthers, right, that merged with the Oakland Invaders.
Right.
You're talking about these teams, Bob, they've got NFL talent. They've got guys across the board. Anthony Carter with the Michigan Panthers and the Oakland Invaders, he's in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
Bobby Hebert, he's down in New Orleans, hell of a quarterback, right? You're talking about some dudes that can play not just on one side of the ball, all over the place, right? You got 3 straight Heisman Trophy winners.
Right.
And this is why Roselle has got to do everything in his power to ignore the league, because the league is putting money on the table. It's competing. Now, let's be honest. If Trump and some of the owners like Donovan don't get so excited, open up their checkbooks, the teams on the lower echelon financially maybe could have lasted longer.
Right.
Given them 2, 3, 4 more years in the spring, now the NFL has a bigger problem.
Right.
And people forget, ESPN does not have an NFL contract till 1987.
Right.
So the NFL's got a monopoly on ABC, NBC, CBS. There's no such thing as Fox. ESPN has got an exclusive contract with the USFL.
Right.
The USFL's commissioner is Chet Simmons, who started ESPN.
Right.
And so that contract, even in 86, let's imagine that the 8 teams left in 86 that aren't in NFL compete in 86 with an ESPN contract. Maybe they compete. And it's really, there's a debate among the owners over, was it the court case? Was it Trump's lack of support to continue to play? Trump still owed Walter Duncan $2.5 million if they played in 86.
Right.
If they don't play, he doesn't owe them the money.
Right.
So there's a lot of things going into that. But the reality for me, Bob, is that the talent was there. The TV contract was there. And, the USFL, it's a shame they don't play in 86.
Yeah. I can see that. I can really see that. And again, you can beat a dead horse all the time. If the USFL just stayed as a spring league, they would be around probably still till today. I mean, there's no reason why they wouldn't be, and again, look at the XFL, look at USFL, United Football League, so on and so forth. This lasting reincarnation of it right now, although it's a good attempt, you just don't see the enthusiasm like you saw for a regular USFL season, so on and so forth. So
we've had the
Keith,
Canadian
Keith,
Football
you
League in
see a
Memphis.
relationship between do you see a relationship between what happened in the NFL in 1987 during the strike and the effect that the USFL had on it? Or is there no correlation in your mind?
Well, I think, John, that's a great question, because in 1985, the NFL Players Association crossed over and brought in the USFL players, guaranteed a $25,000 minimum, insurance across the board for every player and their family, life insurance for every player in the USFL. And everybody knew that in 86 that the collective bargaining agreement was up was re-up at the end of the 86 season. And so many of the owners, like Billy Donovan, figured, let's compete with the NFL. They're about to have some serious bargaining problems with their union.
Yep.
And we still have a product. When the NFL goes out on strike and we're head-to-head, we got them. And that was one of the arguments many of the owners made for going to the spring and supporting that. I think I talked to Paul Reitz, and he got a great viewpoint. Everybody makes Trump out to be the villain in this, but those guys that were owners, they had Trump money. In fact, they had more money than Trump in 1985.
Yeah.
Remember, we judged Trump as he was in 85. He's not the dude that it is by 2015. This is Trump in 85. The other guys weren't intimidated by him. They had his money. There were guys every bit as boisterous, right? John Bassett's one of them. And, they thought, okay, this guy from New York, maybe he's got an idea that because we've got the TV contract, we can go head to head. This may be a little different than the Dixon plan, just playing in the spring, but it gives us a chance. And if it gives us a chance to save the millions we've invested, okay, I'm ready to listen. And when Paul said that, I had to take a step back, but I'd have to agree with him. These guys weren't intimidated by the Donald. They had his money. They were every bit as boisterous. And what they did like was his unique idea. And I was like, that's him. And I think that sort of allows that to go that way. Now, Bassett pulls out of the USFL. Remember, he said, if the USFL goes to the fall in 86, the Bandits, I'm going to form another spring league and we'll play in that, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
There's some interesting dynamics that play out at the end of 85 and through the spring of 86 when the USFL is waiting for the antitrust case and the supposed fall season of 86.
Wow.
Wow, there's so much there. It's incredible to think about. What to me at least at that time, I was just in middle school, junior high, watching those games and getting really excited about those and being able to watch football, but just what was going on behind the scenes. I look forward to reading your book.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's some great information, Keith. I learned an enormous amount. I mean, in a very short period of time about the whole dynamics of the USFL. I had, again, I was stuck with whatever was written in the sporting news at the time or Sports Illustrated, and that's basically what I had to go by. So
the relationship between the NFL and Sports Illustrated. I mean, the NFL is propping up Sports Illustrated. Its growth is the NFL, right? When in the 70s, when football surpasses baseball as our American pastime, baseball is taking that dive. Sports Illustrated is right there, and Roselle does a great job, right? You've got NFL Films, you've got Sports Illustrated, right? Those things are allowing the NFL and professional football to surpass baseball. And I think that's sort of when the USFL jumps on the scene, does Sports Illustrated really want to, chop its nose off to spite its face?
Right.
And, jump wholeheartedly on this USFL bandwagon and lose maybe the shield, right? The NFL, the shield. You got to protect the shield.
Right.
Those dynamics are playing into it. So, but that being said, one of the points in the book I'm really trying to hammer home is the same way at the NFL and Sports Illustrated, and I'm arguing that ESPN made the USFL. And to be honest, the USFL is one of the things that bumps ESPN up, right? That's why the NFL jumps on that in '87, get the USFL out of the way. And then once again, the NFL's got the monopoly of TV.
Right.
And just look at ESPN and NFL today.
Right. Exactly. And again, that's a big reason why, again, back to the publications, why I loved the sporting news, because the sporting news covered everything. They used to cover the ABA. They covered the WFL when they were in existence. They covered the minors. I mean, they did a great job actually covering sports, something that we don't see today, obviously. I mean, because,
the new paradigm,
5.
Fox. In fact, Steve Earhart, the new USFL or UFL, is partnership with Fox. And Fox wasn't, Fox used all the USFL monikers. I'm in the red, white, and blue shirt. I wanted this for you guys today. Bob, with the old USFL moniker, the letters and the American flag.
Yeah.
Fox took that without permission. Many of these owners are still there. Larry Zonka was in Jacksonville. He wasn't thrilled when Fox, came out and just took the Jacksonville Bull name. And Steve Earhart actually sued Fox over the use of all the monikers, the names, and they've been working out an out of court settlement. To work through that, but Fox has become a conglomerate. It's huge. The guys left over really want to spend millions of dollars, and how much money can Fox throw at this and not bat an eye?
Right.
So the legacy of the USFL is important to the guys that are still here that were running it in the 80s.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, Keith, we're running out of time. Can you give our audience information on how to obtain your books and where they can contact you, or a website, or whatever it may be?
Right. So, Bob, first, my website is www.keithbwoodauthor.com. I know that's a little long. You can check my website there. And the books, the Memphis Red Sox book came out with McFarland, and the Memphis Hoops is with the University of Tennessee Knoxville Press. Those are available on Amazon, locally in Memphis at novel bookstores and Oxbow. You can also get them at Barnes & Noble online. I've got them available on my website. If you'd rather buy through me and I can autograph a copy for you, just sent a proposal to McFarland. Talked to them this summer at a conference. They were really high on the Showboat in Memphis idea. My hope is to secure a contract within the next month for Showboat in Memphis, and sort of get that manuscript to them by January. So we're probably about a year and a half out from the publication of Showboat in Memphis.
Well, that's good. I can honestly say, in all the years I've been doing this, I have a scoop on a new book. So, and on something that we at Gridiron Greats like, which is a non-NFL league that actually, did a lot historically, so on and so forth. So that's good. And again, McFarland is very good with what they publish sports-wise, especially with football, along with, I'll give a quick plug to St. John's Press also. They do a great job with a lot of football titles also. So I'm glad we still have those publishers out there who are willing to publish books like yours, which I think are very, very valuable to the history of the game of of football. And Gridiron Greats magazine is trying to preserve the history of the game for many years now. So I will look forward to when your book comes out. We'll review it in the magazine, and when it gets published, we'll have you back on at the same time. We can talk more about it. But I'll tell you, I got to thank you, because this was an education this afternoon for me, and John also, on the USFL. I thought I knew a little about the USFL. I cannot compare what I heard today with items I knew. That's for sure. So
I'd love to, let's talk about putting some excerpts between now and when the book comes out in the Gridiron Great magazine. Let's do it. Let's let your readers jump in, and we can pick different topics, different players, and just give people bits and pieces.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be a great preview to the book when it comes out. I'd be more than happy to send you short bits and pieces, and let your readers know a little bit more about the USFL. Because to be honest, the publication process is glacial. It's very slow moving. Takes about a year or two to get a book from manuscript to publication. And so would love to keep this conversation going.
all right, that'd be good. I'll look forward to those articles in the future, and we'll definitely publish them in the magazine. All right, Keith, thank you for being on.
Appreciate it.
John,
That's quite an education, like Bob said. More needs to be said about this, and the influence that it's had on what we're seeing on the field today, for sure. And we appreciate your time.
I think the big thing that people tell me I live in the past too much, but I also think about the way things used to be when it was a glamorous Sunday for me just to sit in front of a black and white TV and watch two games back to back, and actually see plays evolve, see the game played, not having the what's a good word, the constant flow of commercials, the instant replay 45 times of the same play after every play, so on and so forth, commercial into the screen, so on. It becomes frustrating to watch after a while. And I used to tell people back in the 00s, I preferred listening to football on radio, because at least it was you could recreate in your own mind what you saw happening. And today now on all levels of football, it's amazing. That's why I like going to a local high school game, because I know I don't get any interruptions. I can just watch the game and
really watch the game. The true fan, and I think that's one thing the USFL does. It allows the fan to see an exciting game.
Yeah.
Get in at a reasonable price.
Yeah.
And what are you paying for an NFL ticket these days?
Right? No.
You're paying these guys, and you're watching a game. You want to talk about Jim Kelly, that run and shoot?
Yeah.
I'm watching that last night going, how do we stop them? It's fun football. Herschel Walker. There's a dude at the height of his career, really, with the New Jersey Generals, just looks like Jim Brown, Bo Jackson, right? Like, you're talking a dude. And it's exciting to see these guys out there. And then here's the other thing. When you go into a USFL game, there's guys that couldn't catch a cup of water in the USFL. Here's their chance to cement their legacy and say, hey, you didn't think I was good enough? I am. Let's do it. Yeah,
exactly. Great story, Keith. I'm glad I had you on. This was great. All right. We're almost out of time, John. Any final thoughts?
Just, glad to be involved with this still in 2024 after all these years, starting off as a kid and going to shows and hustling a little bit back in the early 80s and 40 some years later, still doing the same thing. It's a nice feeling, and being down here now with you and hoping to revive some of those old memories, just sitting behind a table and trying to sell a few cards. So thanks for that. Thanks for keeping the magazine going too, Bob.
You're quite welcome, John, and I look forward to the next time we'll be behind the table, and I'll be selling. Maybe I'll buy some Pokemon and open them up and put them in the case there in the special case that we have. But anyways, Yeah, I agree with you. It's come a long way since 1965 when I bought my first packs. But I still enjoy looking at my collection. I still enjoy reading my books, my memorabilia. That's what it's all about. Maybe not so much for the 2024 game, but man, that game back in 1984 and back and whenever, it means a lot to me. All right, that's it. We're out of time. Check out our website, gridirongreatsmagazine.com. If you're not a subscriber to Gridiron Greats Magazine, what are you waiting for? Gridiron Greats Magazine. And that's it. Hopefully we'll have a show next week, and we'll see you then.
Take it easy. Bye-bye.